Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? This poetic piece of wisdom is one of many from Gandalf that we will explore today. I'm Aaron, your host and fellow Middle-earth wanderer, and today on Lore of the Rings, we finish our wandering of the second chapter of J.R.R. Tolkien's Fellowship of the Ring. Now, let's wander.
It's time for another season of the Palmetto Porch, an original podcast from Discover South Carolina. I'm Devin Whitmire. Join me as I get to the heart of what makes South Carolina such a great place to visit by speaking to the locals who make it so special. Premiering December 5th, find the Palmetto Porch wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information about our show, visit scpalmettoporch.com.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
We start with a map check. Inspired by the beautiful maps that accompany the Lord of the Rings books, my intention with these map checks is to give you context for today's tale. Sort of like if you were to open up the Fellowship of the Ring book and try to find the Shire on a map of Middle-earth. We are in Chapter 2 of Fellowship of the Ring, The Shadow of the Past. In my 2002 Houghton Mifflin edition, we are covering pages 57 through 61. We have been exploring Gandalf and Frodo's last conversation before Frodo leaves the Shire. Gandalf has given Frodo the history of the rings, and in particular, the history of the One Ring. Last time, we looked deeply at Gollum's story. Today, we finish our exploration of this chapter. But before we get to the main points of this section, I want to highlight a small line from today's reading and contrast that with the chapter title. This chapter has been a lot of backstory, a lot of history, hence the title, The Shadow of the Past. But Frodo lives in the present, and a new threat is rising, or as Gandalf says, quote, all folk were whispering then of the new shadow in the south. This line signals a shift. Gandalf changes from history to current times, and presents Frodo with his main challenge. Quote, he knows that it is the one, and he has at last heard, I think, of hobbits and the Shire. When Gandalf says this, Frodo feels the weight of his burden. The fear of the shadow settles on him. He asks Gandalf for advice, and in an attempt to deflect responsibility, Frodo says, quote, what a pity that Bilbo did not stab that vile creature when he had the chance. In Frodo's mind, if Bilbo had killed Gollum, then Gollum would not have survived to inform Sauron about the One Ring, Bilbo, and the Shire. Perhaps the Shire could have been saved. But would it, though? I see two implications of this alternate reality. First, Sauron finding the One Ring is inevitable. He is drawing all wicked things to him, the ring included, and the One Ring, having its own intentions, would seek to get into the hands of an evil creature and thus return to its master. Would the enemy's search for the ring taken longer? Absolutely. But without intervention, Sauron would reclaim the ring sooner or later. Second, Bilbo made a choice. I've explored this choice on the show before. Bilbo is the first person in history to claim the ring without bloodshed. Gollum was in his hands. Bilbo could have struck him with no witnesses, and no one would ever know the true story of Gollum. But it was not so, and this choice of mercy made all the difference to Bilbo. Because of that choice, Bilbo was also the only person in Middle-earth who willingly gave up the ring and passed it on to another. As Gandalf says, quote, be sure that Bilbo took so little hurt from the evil, and escaped in the end, because he began his ownership of the ring so. Imagine if Bilbo had not had pity, and had struck and killed Gollum. Would he have been able to pass the ring to Frodo? Or more likely, would Bilbo have continued to murder in order to keep the ring? Smeagol murdered Deagle. Is it a far stretch to think of Bilbo murdering Frodo because he was enthralled by the evil of the ring? But then Gandalf might intervene and take the ring for himself, which has a whole set of complications which we'll get into in a moment. But Gandalf taking the ring away from a murderous Bilbo? Yikes. Lord of the Rings would be a lot more like Game of Thrones. Let's get back on track. Bilbo has pity on Gollum, and that seemingly small choice saved Middle-earth. Also, notice how Tolkien, through Gandalf's words, defines pity. Not to strike without need. Christopher Snyder, in The Making of Middle-earth, points out that this definition is, quote, almost chivalric, drawing on Tolkien's love and expertise in the Norse myths. Frodo, though, is still not convinced, and he wishes death upon Gollum, to which we get another beautiful life lesson from Gandalf and an oft-quoted line from the movies. Quote, many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment. Gandalf then predicts that Gollum has some part to play before it is all over. Quote, for good or ill, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many. Spoiler alert, let's fast forward 900 pages to the Return of the King. Frodo, in Mount Doom, is unable to throw the ring into the consuming fires. Gollum intercedes, taking the ring, and in his celebration, falls with the ring to their mutual destruction in the fires. Afterwards, Frodo remembers this advice from Gandalf and finds it completely fulfilled. Quote, but do you remember Gandalf's words? Even Gollum may have something yet to do. But for him, Sam, I could not have destroyed the ring. So, let us forgive him. So let's track that. Bilbo had pity and mercy to spare Gollum's life. Because Gollum lived, he informed the Dark Lord that the ring still survived and provided clues as to where it was, which, as we'll see, was the kicker to get Frodo out of the Shire and on the road. And in the end, it was Gollum's lust for the ring that finally ended the Dark Lord's shadow over Middle-earth, an act for which Frodo found not only mercy, but forgiveness for Gollum. Tracking with me? Awesome. Let's take this a touch deeper. Longtime listeners of this show are familiar with the term eucatastrophe. Tolkien invented this term. A eucatastrophe is a literary device, a point in the story when all things look dire and hopeless, and yet there is a sudden, unlooked-for turn for the good. The Eagles coming to the Battle of Five Armies, for instance. Now, while eucatastrophe is unlooked for, it can't be something totally random. It requires a setup, some foreshadowing event or act. Otherwise, eucatastrophe would look more like Deus ex machina, or some random intervention that doesn't make sense in the story, like the end of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, for instance. Going back to Christopher Snyder's words in The Making of Middle-earth, quote, ultimately, pity, or mercy, is the device upon which the Lord of the Rings eucatastrophe depends. Because Frodo takes pity on Gollum, Gollum survives to the end of the journey and is there to wrest the ring from Frodo. Without Gollum's intervention, the One Ring would not have been destroyed. So back to Fellowship and this current chapter. The final eucatastrophe of the novel is being set up right here in Bag End, during this conversation about pity and mercy between Gandalf and Frodo. But if that's not enough to convince you, let's explore how the next scene is a foreshadowing of the ending of the book, played out right inside Bag End. Before we get to that, I am so appreciative to all of you who have taken the time to leave a rating and review. You are truly amazing, my fellow wanderers. Now, you who are listening to this episode right now, if you love it, please take a moment to share your thoughts by leaving a rating and review. I read every single one and love to hear from you. With Gollum's future fate now set as the final eucatastrophe for the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien employs another subtle literary tactic, foreshadowing. Frodo has realized that the Dark Lord is hunting him, and that the ring he bears comes with great danger. He quickly goes through his options, get rid of it or destroy it. Frodo claims that he would have it destroyed if Gandalf had told him to. Gandalf calls his bluff. Quote, try now. Frodo takes the ring from his pocket and observes it. Almost as if he had never seen the ring before, he realized that, quote, the gold looked very fair and pure, and Frodo thought how rich and beautiful was its color, how perfect was its roundness. It was an admirable thing and altogether precious. He finds that he cannot fling the ring into the fire. With a great, quote, effort of will, he tries to throw the ring away, but is surprised to find that he puts the ring back in his own pocket. There's a few things happening here. First, the ring is already starting to take hold on Frodo. Slow, subtle, yes, but still a hold. Second, the ring cannot be willed away. It is too strong and powerful. Remember, into the One Ring, Sauron poured a great portion of his own will and power. The ring is a great power to contend with. A simple hobbit cannot simply will it away. Bilbo barely could give the ring away, even with his pity and mercy, and all of Gandalf's help. Leaving the ring behind was an enormous act, one for which sheer will of force would be insufficient. But this small scene also foreshadows the final moments of Frodo and the ring. Frodo has traveled hundreds of miles, seen friends fall along the way, to barely arrive at the cracks of Mount Doom. Yet still, he cannot find the will to cast the ring into the fire. Instead, Frodo claims the ring as his own. At least, in this opening scene in the Shire, Frodo can still put the ring in his pocket. Lastly, we need to look at Gandalf's reaction to Frodo's attempt to destroy the ring. He laughs, the sort of laugh I think you would make if something nefarious you believed to be happening actually turned out to be true. But as for the option of Gandalf taking the ring from Frodo, Gandalf says that, in doing so, he would, quote, break your mind. He used almost the exact phrase before in reference to taking the ring from Bilbo. But also this phrase shows Gandalf's incredible self-restraint. Yes, he was willing to allow the One Ring to remain in the Shire, or as he says, quote, I had to take some risk. But in Gandalf's worldview, the ends do not justify the means. Gandalf would not cross the line of force or coercion. And why not? For one, that line is what separates him from Sauron and Saruman. That he will persuade and debate and even haggle, but he will never force anyone unwillingly into actions that advance the cause of light. This is also part of the original charge of the wizards. They were sent to aid the free people of Middle-earth against Sauron, but they were also, quote, forbidden to seek to rule the wills of men or elves by open displays of power. That's from Tolkien's book titled Unfinished Tales. So, Gandalf refuses to take the One Ring by force, but he can still be tempted by the ring, and we'll get to that right after this break. We're not done yet. If you like this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be right back. You can be the hero of your own Marvel Comics adventure. Marvel Strike Force is an extraordinary mobile game, a haven for comic book enthusiasts and gamers alike. Lead your own fellowship of heroes and villains to battle against the forces of darkness that threaten the very fabric of the universe. From the menacing Doctor Doom to the formidable Apocalypse, every battle is a chance to prove your mettle. And right now, Marvel Strike Force is commemorating its 6-year anniversary. That means free rewards await those who heed the call and sign up today. With weekly events and bonuses, this anniversary celebration promises a treasure trove of special rewards. Rally your allies, sharpen your blades, and dive into the action of Marvel Strike Force today. Use code MAXPOOL to unlock free new treasures. That's code MAXPOOL, all one word, on the mobile game Marvel Strike Force. Now, back to wandering. Gandalf now presents Frodo with the only solution. Quote, there is only one way, to find the cracks of doom in the depths of Orodruin, the Fire Mountain, and cast the ring in there. The ring must be destroyed. Before Frodo decides to take the ring to Mordor, he offers the ring to Gandalf. Again, Gandalf shows amazing humility and self-restraint. He knows he cannot take the ring. Even his desires to do good and heal the world would eventually be turned to evil purposes. This is another theme of the Lord of the Rings. Those with great power need to know their limits. Even Gandalf the Grey, one of the spiritual Maiar who serve the gods of Middle-earth, the Valar, even he knows that he must check his desires. His intentions, no matter how good or well-meaning, would consume the world. The will to dominate, even to force your will onto others, is the inevitable result. As Gandalf taught Frodo earlier in this chapter, anyone who bears the One Ring will fall, quote, sooner or later. Later, if he is strong or well-meaning to begin with, but neither strength nor good purpose will last. Sooner or later, the dark power will devour him. We'll explore other characters' desires and temptations with the ring, not the least of which are Boromir, Galadriel, and Faramir, not to mention our dear gardener Samwise Gamgee, who has his own dreams of power from the Master Ring. At last, Frodo comes to his decision. He must leave the Shire. Let's take a moment and wander through his motivations. Out loud, to Gandalf and himself, he says his primary desire is this, quote, I should like to save the Shire if I could. But note, Frodo wants to save the Shire from the immediate danger of being the current dwelling place for the One Ring. He's not necessarily interested in saving the whole Middle-earth from the machinations of the Dark Lord. He is thinking only of his home, his friends, and their little countryside as agents of the Dark Lord scour the land looking for the ring. But in his mind, Frodo also has another desire, to follow Bilbo and find the old Hobbit if he could. And lastly, the theme of friendship begins to sprout. When people think of the Lord of the Rings, friendship is often one of the words they think of. We're inspired by Sam's loyalty to Frodo, by Merry and Pippin's camaraderie in the face of unknown dangers, by Gimli and Legolas who stand by Aragorn even in the face of well-known dangers, and many more such friendships. This theme starts here, as Gandalf says, quote, I don't think you need go alone, not if you know of anyone you can trust, and who will be willing to go by your side, and that you would be willing to take into unknown perils. Be careful in the choosing. Let's pull over on the side of the road and unpack this fundamental definition of the theme of friendship. First, good and amazing deeds, such as a quest to destroy an evil ring, are not to be done alone. That would be foolish. Goals that require incredible work and effort also require incredible support and friends. Too often, I think we forget this truth in our modern lives. So many of us think we can get by on our own, not sharing our troubles and trying to achieve something alone. If Frodo needed friends along the quest to destroy the ring, then so do you and I on the adventure of life. Next, notice the idea of willingness. A friendship is voluntary. There's no forcing a friendship. A friend is willing to go into unknown dangers with you. At the same time, you must be vulnerable and humble enough to be willing to put that friend in danger as well. Sometimes that means standing up and calling a friend out on a poor choice they are making, aka Sam's disappointment when Frodo claims the ring. And lastly, be careful in the choosing. It's often said that we are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with, and I thank you for spending time with me. The implication is, if you want to be above average, then spend time with people you think are amazing. Now, I'm straying from the text here because Gandalf's warning to be careful is more to avoid the enemy's spies, but I think you see the point. Which leads to the final scene of this chapter, Sam being pulled in through the window. Gandalf suspects him to be a spy, but is quickly convinced that a good punishment for Sam's eavesdropping would be to accompany Frodo on the quest to destroy the ring. Sam articulates his motivations. He simply wants to see elves. Quote, couldn't you take me to see the elves, sir? He says to Frodo. And as a callback to the beginning of this chapter, he also says, quote, I believe them too, whatever Ted may say. Oh, and before we close out, again, I have no idea why Tolkien was so fascinated by Gandalf's eyebrows. You know, those ones that Tolkien described as sticking out further than the brim of his hat in both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings? Well, as Gandalf is interrogating the suspected spy Sam, quote, Gandalf's eyes flashed and his brows stuck out like bristles. Make of that what you will. Join me in the next episode, where we will begin to wander Chapter 3, 3 is Company, and see just how much Peter Jackson slashed from the story for his movie. Sam may get his wish sooner than he thinks. Thank you for wandering Middle-earth with me today. My friends, if you enjoyed this episode, let me know by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing with your friends. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Lore of the Rings Podcast. For feedback on the show, please email me using the link in the show notes. Until next Thursday, remember, not all those who wander are lost.